we're studying 2 chapters, or 24 is not real short, but 25 is, so we put them together. 24 and 25. Verse 1 of 24, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanliness in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. Now, we talked about this a little bit in the when they captured people and they fought them and they got them, but this was not so much a Hebrew. This is a Hebrew wife, a Hebrew man, a Hebrew woman. I guess it could be otherwise too, but I mean, here it's just saying that they should, when he takes a wife, if he finds uncleanliness. Now, one of the things that it talks about here, and some of the other commentaries that kind of enlightened me a little bit, it says a certificate of divorce. He has to write out. It's something in, just like our legal system, we have to have a marriage certificate, license, bond, whatever you want to call it. You also have to have a divorce certificate. Well, that's what they had to do also. And they say that this will cause him to think about it, why there's a problem, and maybe help rectify it so you don't need it. So it's an additional step that he has to put a certificate of divorcement in her hand. Now, we've talked about several times that there were two different, in Jesus' day, there were two different thoughts. One side was, if you burned my toast, I could divorce you. And the other side was only for fornication. Okay? They go back and say that this is stated, it's just that uncleanliness is that state of fornication, some kind of there that they not. And this is, it goes through all this, and at the end, I don't know if it's here in the other commentaries that I was reading, but it said, it always starts with the man, but said the woman can do this too. Okay, so if the woman, something's happening to the woman, she can write a certificate of divorce and go through that. And it's mainly if they're unfair. This was put out, you gotta remember, this was Moses' time, which was, 1,200 years before Jesus. So this is setting up, before that he's setting them up that they have some rules, like we said before, all kinds of different rules. He told them to it 40 years ago when they left the wilderness. Now he's telling it again to these new people, the ones that all died, all their parents and everything's died. It says Christians, this is C.S. Lewis talking, which I like what he says. All regard divorce as something like cutting up a living body, as a kind of surgical operation. Some think that the operation is so violent that it cannot be undone at all. Others admit that it is a desperate remedy in extreme cases. They all agree that it's more like having your legs cut off than it is like dissolving a business partnership or even deserting a regiment. So it's serious. God made us as one body, man and woman, when we come together. And when we try to split that apart, it's just like cutting our arm off, we're cutting our leg off, we're cutting. And they say it even refers back maybe when Jesus was saying, if you see something in your eye and you see unclean, take that eye out. So it's kind of in that same connotation that you're working together. If that happens, sometimes it happens and you have to do it, but you're not whole anymore. You're basically, you're apart. And it also, the word for Hebrew for divorce has its idea of hewing off or cutting apart. It's an amputation of that which is one flesh. So today it's a lot more lenient, and it was in Jesus' days also. One faction of them was real lenient. The others, Jesus said, except before fornication. That's the only thing. So it says, in other words, it's not enough for a man just to declare we're divorced to his wife. The divorce has to be recognized, and that's what the certificate of divorce is. Must be issued and properly served. He has to put it in her hand. She finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanliness in her. Now we jump on down to letter 2 there. It says, Jesus carefully and properly defined what uncleanliness is in Deuteronomy when they asked him. Deuteronomy 24. He said, whoever divorces his wife except for, King James says fornication, this says sexual immorality, and marries another commits adultery. Matthew 19 and 9. I cannot talk. Jesus rightly understood that uncleanness refers to sexual immorality, which is a broad term referring to sexual sin, which includes but not restricted to intercourse with someone who is not your spouse. The Hebrew word translated uncleanness in itself implies the meaning of sexual immorality. It is literally nakedness of a thing. Okay? So that's what the word actually means. Very bottom says Matthew 19 and 8. Moses, because of the hardness, Jesus speaking, because of the hardness of your heart, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And it goes on and talks to it there. In the day of Jesus, rabbis taught it was the duty of a godly man to divorce his wife if she displeased him. That's what the rabbis taught. Okay, you go from what it was in Moses' days to what it is in Jesus' days. Both Jesus and Moses made it clear God permits it, but never commands it. Yet if someone has biblical grounds of divorce, which according to 1 Corinthians 7 and 15 includes abandonment by an unbelieving spouse, they certainly do have permission to divorce, and God doesn't hold it against them. He has specifically told them not to divorce, and they are disobeying his specific words to their lives, okay? Here again, you have to, that's why it's so important to go in. A lot of kids go in young and, goo-goo-eyed, I guess. Even old people. We had a friend here, an acquaintance, I'll say it that way. His wife died, he was older, and he married another lady, and it didn't last 6 months or something like that. It was just like, he was just lonely. Wanted somebody, and she wasn't part of that, evidently. 2 through 4, Brother Epson.
Since when she has departed from his house and goes becomes another man's wife, if the latter husband detests her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, sends her out of the house, or if the latter husband dies, who took her as his wife, then her former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled. For this is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance.
Okay. Seems like this might be a good thing for the first husband and wife to get back together. But this command is made because God wanted both marriage and divorce to be seen as serious, permanent things. One couldn't be married or divorced casually. It had to be carefully thought out. This law would also strengthen the second marriage. It would discourage a spouse from thinking they might as well just leave their second marriage and go back to their first. So, it was put there for a reason for them, that you can't go back.
That's a lot of drama.
It is. It is. Iris, verse 5.
he shall be free at home 1 year and bring happiness to his wife whom he has taken.
Okay, we read this a couple of weeks ago, when they were getting ready for the army. They said if the men's were getting ready to go out in the army, there's some exceptions, okay? One of them if he was married, one of them if he was just built a house and had to prove it, and there was another one, I don't remember what it was, but, so we've talked about this before. The marriage covenant here is to establish the marriage, not to run off as soon as there's a war and take off, because they were getting ready to go into the promised land, and they was gonna have a couple of 3 years here or more of wars. And the guys that's on the east side of the Jordan, they promised that they would go and help them. So if they had just gotten married, they're gonna have to go help their brothers across the river, and they may not see their wives for a while. And it was for a while. So they had a year to help make or bring happiness to the wife, as it said. In Ephesians 5, it says the role of the husband, we see that God emphasizes the essential oneness between a husband and a wife. The husband cannot make his wife happy without also bringing happiness into his own life. Conversely, he cannot bring misery into the life of his spouse without also bringing misery into his own life. A happy wife is the foundation for a happy home. A bitter or contentious wife makes for a miserable home. Proverbs says a continual dripping on a very rainy day and a contentious woman or alike. Better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. So, and that applies to both sides. It's not just. Okay, Tammy, the next one, verse 6.
No man shall take the lower or the upper millstone in pledge, for he takes one living in pledge.
Okay. Millstone is what they used. It's an instrument they used to grind their grain. Okay. They had big millstones where you go to the miller, they pour the corn or wheat or whatever in, and oxen would tread around, and a big top millstone would run across it, crunch it all up, and make powder, and they would make their bread. But each house could also have the little millstones, these small ones, and they could do it in their house. And that's what it's saying. Don't take their livelihood. If they don't have that, they can't make bread. They didn't live like we go to the market and we buy wheat, 2 weeks groceries, whatever. They had a sack of feed over here, a sack of wheat, and in order to make their bread, they had to grind the bread, and then make the flour, make the bread, and they did it for that day. They may make a few of them, but they, depending on how big their family is. But they didn't have it where they could go out. So if you take that from them as a pledge, say, I give it to you because we're going to go, you promised to do something for me and I'll give that as a pledge. It said you don't want to do that. You're taking these things. It says the non-essential items could be taken as a pledge, although interest could not be charged on a loan to an Israelite in need. A pledge could be taken collateral to guarantee the repayment of the loan. We think back to the 12 brothers, the tribes, and Judah was the one. He gave a pledge to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, when she was dressed up as a harlot. And you can go back and read that story if you want. But that's what she asked for, a pledge. And he gave his signet ring and his staff, something else. I don't remember what else it was. So that was the pledge, because he said, I'll give you a goat. That's what it was. The cost of the night's pleasure. And so he didn't have the goat with him. He said, well, I want a pledge. So the next day he sent the goat down to find the harlot, and they said, there ain't no harlot here. And then 9 months later, I guess they found out 3 or 4 months later, his daughter-in-law, and he had already told her that if she would just wait, her husband died, and she was supposed to be a Levirate marriage, supposed to wait for the brother, okay? Well, the brother was small, the other two had died and all this stuff. Like I said, you can go back and read it, but it's, waiting for his son. Well, his son was young, 13, 14, 15 year old, and not age yet to go. Now he'd grown up, it'd been a few years, and she had waited, so he recognized that, okay, yeah, I was in the wrong. And didn't kill her, because that was one of the things. She was supposed to be killed for her sexual promiscuity.
Did they kill guys back then for that?
At the time, that's one of the laws that they said. If you found a couple that was not married, but one of them was married, okay, a man was married and a wife was, we had 2 weeks ago, I think it was, if a man came upon a woman out in the field and she hollered and nobody heard him, you know, all these things, but if he did it in the city, then it's not, they wouldn't stone them, they would stone them both, because she'd cry out but nobody came to rescue her. Supposedly wasn't loud enough, but yes, they would kill the man. And that's the whole point of Jesus' story when they brought the woman, that they caught her in the act of adultery, and they asked her, what are you going to do, Jesus? And he knelt down and started writing in the sand, you know. And first thing he may have said, well, where's his husband? Where's the guy you caught? Because you have to have witnesses, 2 witnesses, in order to stone a person. That's in the law that we've discussed before. They didn't have that. They had these group of guys that was around this lady, and if you read the intention, she was probably sitting there naked, because it, quote, caught her in the act. Supposed to be. So they already are, Jesus already sees through them, that you didn't bring the guy too, okay, so you're trying to trap him. And of course the story is, let the man who was without sin cast the first stone, and when he looked up, everybody's gone, except her. And he didn't condemn her, but a lot of people miss it. He said, go and sin no more. So we have to recognize that, but that is part of it. They both should have been punished. Now, we talked about this last week, I think it was, that most of the time this wasn't carried out. A death sentence by stoning wasn't carried out. It's very rare, they said, that they found that this was carried out for whatever reason. That was just the commentaries. 2 cents on it.
Well, were women back then more property?
More or less.
Okay.
But that was definitely true of Egypt. And definitely true of any non-Hebrew. But even the ones that they captured, the people they captured, they killed all the men and they kept the women for themselves. But they had to go through a ritual. They had to be with them for a month. Wasn't it a month or a year? I don't remember now. Before they would marry them. Maybe it's a year. They'd stay with them. It was a month. They had to mourn for a month. If they got their father killed or brother or whoever was taking care of them. Okay? So if you follow through with what was the Canaanites' history versus what God is telling them now, he's placing women a lot higher on the status. Even though it doesn't seem like it, they are a lot. That's why he's saying here that the woman has some rights. And we see that a little later on. Well, we read it back in Exodus. One man only had 4 daughters, 5 daughters, and said, hey, everybody's getting some land, but there's no son in our lineage, you know. So what? And they said, you're right. God says you're right. You get a part just like all the other guys get a part. And so a lot of people kind of look down on that because they said the Bible's putting women down. It's not at all. They need to read the Bible because God is lifting them up. Again, it's saying it's one. You had 2 people. He was missing a helpmate at the very first, Adam was, and he made somebody just exactly right for him. And they two are one. And because of that, that's where all this, she is in her heart, she does her things, she does her, you know, a lot of people don't like that. But the men does their thing. Women are, some women are really strong. I said that before. There was a girl in our physical ed K. I did not want to take her on. She was pretty wicked. I wouldn't want to tackle her or try to wrestle her. So it's not always true, but for the most part, they are. Did you have another question? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No, that was it. If you look at it and read it for context all through here back and forth, you see that God's putting them, giving more rights to the women, protecting them, telling them, the men, you need to do all this. And then later on in the New Testament, it goes even further, and kind of elevates them, because then you have deaconesses and prophetess. Even here you have prophetesses, I guess is the way you say it. Anyway, verse 7 said, if a man is found kidnapping of any of his brethren, of the children of Israel, and mistreats him or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away the evil from among you. That particular time, like we said, excuse me, in this particular part of the area, in Canaanite area, that was, the slave trade was a big deal. If you can go capture somebody and sell them, that's the way they made money. So that's what they did, and said, you can't kidnap and take, you know, any of the children of Israel at all. Said either they would hold them for ransom or just abduct them for slavery and sell them. That's what happened to Joseph. Even his own brethren said, hey, you know, and the brothers, it's like, okay, hey, that's a good idea. Win-win, you know, we get rid of him and we get a little money on the side. And for, who was it, Reuben, wasn't it? The first one, he came back and was like, where is he? What'd y'all do with him? He didn't know what had gone on. So it's a serious penalty. The crime is death penalty. Brother Epson, 8 and 9.
To heed in an outbreak of leprosy, that you carefully observe to do according to all that the priest, the Levi, shall teach you, just as I commanded you, so you shall be careful to do. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way when you came out of Egypt.
Now there's a couple of whole chapters, I think. Well, the text shows it right there. Leviticus 13 and 14 describes in great detail about the lepers and how that they're to go, and priests have to review what's going on, look at it, and come back 7 days later, and they scrape it, do other things, and if it keeps, then you're declared, oh yeah, you're a leper, and you got to be sent out of the camp for 7 days, and then you come back, and if it's still that way, then you're deemed a leper, and most time lepers didn't recover. But here, he's saying, remember that, okay? Leprosy, and leprosy then versus leprosy today is different. What we think today, leprosy, Hansen's disease, where noses fall off and all those things. Back then, it could be any blemish in the skin. You know, I got something popped up the other day on me, and I have no clue what I said. It can't be a chigger. They're all dead, I hope, or a mosquito or something. I don't know what that is, but, you know, probably in Hebrew, I'd probably have to go have the priest look at that and see if it's a red burning thing or, you know, all the things that you have to go through. And even, you know, to me, even poison ivy, you get poison ivy and it starts oozing and all that stuff. That's why they say go back 7 days later, come back and look at it. If it's getting better, okay, you can see it's not leprosy. You got into something, whatever it is, stay out. But Miriam did. Miriam was the one, she didn't get into anything except fooling around, trying to, her and Aaron going against Moses. And that's when Moses told her, you know, and she was trying to usurp Moses' rights. That's what she was trying to do. and God gave her leprosy, immediately healed her, I mean, just shortly thereafter. But she still had to go 7 days out of the camp. That was what was supposed to happen. So they did. So let's remember that. Even if they had to be, was healed, and they saw it, still had to be quarantined for the time that every one of them is supposed to be. Iris 10-13.
When you lend your brother anything, you shall not go into his house to get his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you lend shall bring the pledge out to you. And if the man is poor, you shall not keep his pledge overnight. You shall in any case return the pledge to him again when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his own garment and bless you, and it shall be righteousness to you before the Lord your God.
Okay. Now they're coming out of Egypt. We've talked about this before. When they came out, they went to their neighbors, and God told them, go to your neighbors and borrow everything you can. Borrow all their jewels and their gold and silver, and they did. So they came out, and they were, quote, rich. Not everybody, but they were more wealthy than they had. They were slaves, so they didn't have anything, hardly, before. But now they did. Well, it's been 40 years, and just like anything else, you're going to have the haves, and you're going to have the have-nots. And a lot of them were the have-nots, because I'm sure that they didn't have, you would think that, for 40 years they was traveling around, they had bread and manna and water, they were fed, but sometimes they want to go or something else, and they have to, ask somebody, and they pledge, or even to, use their millstone or whatever they had to use, they had to give something in return. And here it's talking about something, the poor, all they had was their clothes, pretty much. Maybe they had a robe they slept in at night, because it gets cold out in the desert. So, and that's why he's saying, you can have it for the day, but then you give it back to them by that night. So they won't, maybe freeze, but it's them. It needs to be, the pledge is just for that particular time. Said the Jews in several cases did not act contrary to this rule, and we find them cuttingly reproved for it by the prophet Amos, if you go back and read in Amos chapter 2 and 8. So a lot of this was put into place when they had the going over to Babylon and back, and even in the time after the kings, he had the 2 different kingdoms and all that, a lot of things wasn't being kept like they should be. Some of the Passover, some of the things, the northern kingdom, they set up their own, doing their own Passovers and their own offerings, they set itself apart. So we just see that this was set up for all of them, the whole 12 tribes. And even though it's several hundred years later, they couldn't even follow it for a short amount of time. They kept doing these things.
Does this mean after they've paid off their debt?
I think even though it's not paid off. You can said, okay, you can come back and get it and sleep the night, and you go back and give it to them again until you make good on it, I think. We don't get a lot of details, so we don't know for sure. It talked to us a couple weeks ago about not charging usury, not charging interest to your Hebrews and all that things if you borrow something from it. So I think this is just another elaboration of that, but talking about the Hebrews, that even, again, the people that don't have very much, a lot of times in today's society, they pay more for interest and more for, credit and everything, because they don't have anything to begin with. somebody will take advantage of them. And that's what God didn't want here. He didn't want taking care of the poor. I mean, taking advantage of the poor. He wanted to take care of them. It even goes into the next one, Iris, 14 and 15. Did you read already? Okay, Tammy, I'm sorry.
You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether one of your brethren or one of the aliens who is in your land within your gates. Each day you shall give him his wages, and not let the sun go down on it, for he is poor and has set his heart on it, lest he cry out against you to the Lord, and it be sin to you.
It's just awful hard for us to believe I'd borrow something for a day. You know, but that's what it was back then, because when they work, then at the end of the day they get paid. On their way home, they go by and buy the flour or buy the grain, wheat, oats, whatever, and let the wife go home and give it to her, and she'd make the bread, and then they'd eat, and they'd have it, and then the next day they'd have to go again. Well, he's sick. Well, I don't get anything that day. We both starve, so I need to borrow something, to borrow a little, flour or whatever to make. So that's what it's trying to do. The lesser of the poor and the needy, not to suppress them, not to, even though it talked about, it already specified between a Hebrew and one that you brought in, a slave, not a slave, but one of the aliens, you could charge interest. But here, it says don't oppress them. Don't take advantage of them. Here again, the poor and the needy.
What is an alien? Is that a slave?
It's as they're getting ready. It's not so much it could be a slave. That's one thing. But they go in there. There are some people that came in and wanted, once they captured him, some of them came back and they said, okay, we'll serve you. We see your God. I was listening to a story last night about, not a story, but one of the guys was taking a tour over when Joshua went over the Jordan River, and they crossed over to start their campaign. The Jordan River is not very big, probably as wide as this room most of the time, maybe a little wider, could be deeper. Different places, it's like Arkansas, it's different places. But at that time, it did specify that it was flooding in that area. And they said in that area, it could be up to 2 miles wide through there. Because of that, he went, and the ark went in the water, and the water spread, and they went across. And the people in Jericho, they're about, I think it said 4 or 5 miles away, but they're up on a hill. They said that water stood up at least 60 feet, maybe 100 feet. And it's standing. Then people over there in that city like, holy cow, look at these people coming. We cannot stand them. And that's what Rahab told them. Everybody's heart has fainted because we see the Israelites. We know your God is a true God. So some people wanted to join with them. That's what they're calling alien. They're not a true Hebrew, born of the Hebrews, but they want to join up. They have to be circumcised. They have to do all the stuff to become a Hebrew. And that's also discussed in Deuteronomy, Exodus, and Deuteronomy. So that's what it's saying. But some of these, and they may have been slaves. Some of them may have sold themselves to slaves because they didn't have any money. But still, it's saying a hired servant. And it goes back through there and tells us that in the servants, when they have a servant, when a Hebrew wants to become a servant, they serve somebody for 6 years, 7 years actually. The 7th year they go free. But if they love their master, they tell them, I want to love their master. They go for a judge and they put their ear up against the wall and they bore a hole in it. And I say, okay, this is mine. I'm him. I'm his forever. I'll be okay with that. He takes care of me. They wanted to be a servant because otherwise they'd die. They would, that's what would happen. So it's just a lot different now. We go, some, and I know yours is you get paid every time you do something. Other people, Brother Epson, he gets paid every month. So you have to go all month before he gets his salary. First job I had, it was ever the 15th and the 30th is when we got paid. Well, then I jumped to another job that I got paid every 2 weeks. So it rounded up. Just think about, I only get enough money for one day, and that lasts for that day, and there ain't no buying a car on a 6-year loan. Back then, you'd die before 6 years would come up like they do nowadays. People, they don't have that level. So anyway, we're getting way off the subject.
But the more you study, at first if you just at a glance, it seems difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It seems unfair.
Mm-hmm.
But the more that you study it and the more you know about the customs of that time,
Right.
You can see how so much of our laws
Come from that.
are based on these Judeo-Christian values that
Right.
have been around the Jews forever since the beginning
Forever,
of time.
yeah, that's right. Verse 16 says, fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall the children be put to death for their fathers. A person shall be put to death for his own sin. Now he goes back and talks about that. In some cases, the families were destroyed. Go back to when Joshua, when they did Jericho, and God told them, don't take anything out of there. It's all going to God, everything. We're going to destroy all that. And the next one, they went to Ai to go capture Ai, and they got beat up some fierce. So God said, go down and start talking to each tribe. See, and they got all the way down to Achan. And Achan confessed, I took a bar of silver and gold and a couple of, rags, whatever. And so his whole family died because of it. They killed him and his whole family because God told everybody up front, don't take anything.
You go back as well ago studying about leprosy. Leprosy, even to us today, scripturally, spiritually, is a type and shadow of sin. Not on mankind.
Mm-hmm.
But and then Jesus even himself said a little leaven.
Right.
Leaveneth the whole lump. We're talking about back then, they didn't have hospitals like they have today.
Right.
They didn't have ways of treating leprosy like, if you come out with something, if you didn't nip that in the bud right away, it'd wipe out the whole.
Right.
That's what happened to a certain extent when the pilgrims from, the Europeans started coming over here with all these diseases to the Indians. And if you don't, and if you change that spiritually, for years we've been a melting pot.
Right.
We're not a melting pot anymore. We want to come over here and I want to still be this person. I still want to live by this rule. I'm fleeing that rule. It's like those from California, New York, going to Florida and Texas. When you understand that and you see what he's talking about, times were different. People were different.
It was harsh, but it was for a reason, because they didn't. Nowadays we have more, but still, you get in the hospital, it's like, man, I don't want to go to the hospital if I don't have to. You catch something, more likely, it's just one of those things. 17 and 18, Brother Epson?
You should not pervert justice, do the stranger or the fatherless, nor take a widow's garment as a pledge, but you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I command you to do this thing.
Okay. Here again, protecting the poor, the widow, these things. He doesn't want them to change justice. There has to be a common level playing field. The rules apply to everybody. And because you're this way or because you're that, I can't show you favor. That's what God's trying to tell them there. Don't pervert the justice.
But even this verse right here shows that God was against slavery.
Oh, yeah, yeah. He said, don't do that because you were a slave. You gotta remember that for 400 plus years. Just because somebody's a slave, don't treat them like they're slaves because you were a slave. 19 to 22, Iris? Or where we're at? Is that right? Or did you read that already? Did you read the last one?
That's her there.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, I get confused easily.
When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this thing.
Again, you go back to when they were a slave, they would work for somebody and they would come home. They may be making brick. Don't gotta stick one of these bricks on the arm and take it home, you know. Well, if they find out, they're gonna get beaten to death. Or if they take more than any, more portion of food or whatever, take something that's not there, they're gonna be beat to death because they're a slave. God's saying, we're better than that, you're better than that. When you go through and harvest, go ahead, you can do it. When you harvest trees, the olive trees, they beat on them. Beat the leaves and beat the limbs to knock them down. Gather those up, go to the next tree. Don't go over it again. There's still some fresh ones, small ones that are growing and they'll grow up. Leave that for the orphans and the widows and whoever, the strangers that come through your land. That way they'll have something. The poor, they'll have something to eat. They'll have some. They may not have any land, they may not have any of this, but they'll have something that they can go out. They know that they can go out. Grapes, barley, whatever, all this land. So again, he's protecting them. We talked about it a few weeks ago, and we see that in Boaz when he told him, when he saw that Naomi was out gathering in his field. He said, go ahead, you guys go ahead, when she's out there, go ahead and throw out a couple of handfuls out there. Let her get it. He liked her. So he was trying to help her along. Don't discourage her at all.
This is their welfare system.
It was their welfare to take care of them. And Jesus said, you'll always have the poor.
But also they had to still go to, even though they were getting the leftovers, they still had to go get them. It wasn't.
Exactly. They had to work for it.
They still had to work for it.
Go to the field, go to get it, and go take care of it, and grind it up if it's meal, or if they wanted juice, grind the olives up, or grind the whatever it was, grapes. They had to work at it. It was not given to them at all.
You couldn't afford to be sick back then.
No. And God helped them. We see that was amazing that they lasted 40 years. Their clothes didn't mess up. Their shoes didn't mess up. They didn't have to have another pair of shoes. It's just amazing. 40 years. I've got some 40-year-old clothes and they look pretty bad. I'll wear them for PJs at night and Darla's like, why don't you throw that rag away? Well, it's comfortable. I like it.
Those t-shirts.
Yeah.
They're pretty good.
Yeah, the t-shirt hangs down like this. Everything, Anyway. I'll go ahead and start off 25. If there is a dispute between men and they come to court, that the judges may judge them, and they justify the righteous and condemn the wicked, then it shall be, if the wicked man deserves to be beaten, that the judge will cause him to lie down and be beaten in his presence, according to his guilt, with a certain number of blows. 40 blows he may give him, and no more. lest he should exceed this and beat him with many blows above these, and your brother be humiliated in your sight.
40 blows, I would be dead.
Well, it's one of the things I read about it is going in here, and go back to the Rome at the time. This was not at that time, the Romans wasn't, okay, but later on it was. The Romans they just wanted to be one shy. One thing that I found out reading this in one of the commentaries, most of the whips that they had had three strips on them. So they hit you 13 times. That 13 times 3 is 39. 39 stripes. That way they're always sure that they had one judge that was watching, okay, make sure it did it right, and they had one judge that was counting. That way they didn't go over, because in the Roman times, they could get beaten so they were very careful in getting whooped 49 times or 39 times is not going to be fun. You're going to be hurt. Now it's not what Jesus was whipped with. It's not totally different, but it's just a leather strap, but that's still going to hurt like crazy. But they wanted, and they did it right then. They didn't wait 6 months to do it later or whatever, Take your shirt off, lay down. We're going to do it right here. And they did it, because that's what, whatever the judges said, then that's what they did. Because they were condemned as wicked men for whatever the judges decided. Brother Epson, verse 4, and there's a lot in there. You can go through read it. It said Paul 5 times he was beaten. 39 strokes, 40 minus 1. So
you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain.
we talked about that just a little while ago. You can't take your millstone. Well, when they use the ox to run around and do the grain, some of that would spill out, and they would also throw some on the ground. So the ox would get down there and he'd get him, something to eat while he's walking around and walking around. If they muzzled him, he wouldn't be able to eat. And you're basically torturing him, making him work and not able to eat the time that he's working. So he said you can't muzzle an ox while he's treading out the corn. It's like common sense. That's what I would say. Some of the things that's here. You want me to read the next one, Iris? It's a long one. 5 through 10. You want to read it, or you want me to read it? Okay. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies, this is the Levite marriage that we were talking about earlier, and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gates to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal removed. And here some of them say that it's not so much spit in his face, it's spit in it. You spit, you're not into his face, but while you're in his face, you spit down. Could be either way, we don't know. But this is one of the things and what this goes about, it's proving the community, the family, wanting to keep the family whole. It was a family purpose at this time to have, his brother needed a child and he didn't have a child at that time. And it talks about, he didn't have a son, but we see that the ladies also got the land. We talked about that. So it could be daughter either. They just didn't have a child at that time to raise up, to take the land. So this was one of the things that they did. We go back again to Boaz and Ruth, and Boaz went to the nearest relative, and he said, this guy has died, Naomi's wife, and Naomi's husband died, and I want to buy his land. And the guy goes, ooh, I want to buy that land too. He goes, well, you got to take what comes with it. He's got a wife, but you need to take it. Oh no, I don't want that, I don't want that. So she did at that particular time. They went for the judges, and they did this very exact thing. And he said, okay, took off his shoe and everything, and Boaz says, I'll take it. So he took off, Boaz took off his sandal and said, I will take over, and I will take over, and raise up a family for them. So that plays in, that's what, one of the things goes all the way back to Deuteronomy here. Yeah, here in the middle of the page it says son, and said, if you actually go back to the Septuagint, which is the LXX, and Josephus, which was way back in time also, the Septuagint is one of the earliest copies that we have, but it's in Latin, the Septuagint is. It renders that word, instead of son, child. In Hebrew it's called ben, but it could mean ben or child. And the way the commentators or the writers back then wrote it in Latin, it was actually came back child. That way it could mean either way. Okay? Now you get to read 11 and 12, Iris.
If two men fight together, and the wife of one draws near to rescue her husband from the hand of the one attacking him, and puts out her hand and seizes him by the gentle, then you shall cut off her hand. Your eyes shall not pity her.
That's pretty tough, huh?
Atlanta.
You don't want to get involved in the fights.
That's terrible.
Well, it is.
Well,
First of all, it's 2-on-1. Okay. That's the least of the words. It says, perhaps also the law arose from the desire to protect the reproductive organs, and thus obviate anything that might prevent a man leaving descendants. That's about as far as I'll go with that. Because I don't have a clue. They don't have a whole lot to say on it either, okay? It's immodest. That's what it's saying. That's a vice that evidently if she's done that before, she'll do it again type thing. So, okay, Tammy, 13 and 16, 216.
you shall not have in your bag different weights, differing weights, a heavy and a light. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall not have a perfect. You shall have a perfect and a just weight, a perfect and a just measure, that your days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord your God has given you. For all you do is such things. All who behave unrighteously are an abomination to the Lord your God.
You had two sets of weights. This one was heavy and this one was light. And they come up to buy something from you. You went up to buy somebody and you put in your heavy weights or your light weights, whatever, and you're differentiating, you're getting the difference. Okay, besides what trying to set it. He's saying you need to do it rightly, justly. Have one set of weights. Now it may not, now back in that times here again, I know they tried to make it exact, but even then, I'm sure they were off a little bit if they went from one person's weights to another person. But if that same person's using that same weight for everybody, then he's doing it fairly. The last three verses are on Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were attacked coming out of Egypt. Now you gotta remember, these kids may not even been born when this attack happened, when they were coming up from Egypt. How he met you on the way and attacked you, your rear ranks, all the stragglers at your rear, when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around, the Lord which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance, that you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. They didn't. Okay, we know that because who did Saul attack? And he didn't wipe them out either. The Amalekites. Who is Amalek? The leader. He's a grandson of Esau. Okay? So, you had Jacob and Esau. Jacob had the 12 sons. Well, Esau, he went and he got his family together, but he was joined up with all kinds of evil stuff. Go back, if you look through that, Esau was also named Edom. So he's the Edomites. And then some of the people that were joined in at the time, the Horites and the Horans, that's where he married into, his grandson married into, or his son married into, got Amalekites, so that then you made the Amalekites. So there's a lot of bad blood. I mean, even though Esau and Jacob got back together later on, it didn't matter. And the Amalekites, for whatever reason, came up and they attacked Israel as they were going by for no reason. And that's what God said, go up there and beat the snot out of them, take care of them. And they did, but they didn't. Some got away. And they were persistent even until Saul's day. Like I said, until the Amalekites. And even then, some of them were still, I think David still had some problems with the Amalekites. So, appreciate everybody coming out. We'll be back next week. Be back Sunday.